for our final conversation, we're going to have a perspective from smack dab in the center of one of the most complex and important and closely watched power grids in the United States. Our next guest has spent over 30 years in the energy business and 10 years in the United States House of Representatives. Please join me in welcoming former Texas Member of Congress and current ERCOT Board of Directors Chair, Bill Flores. Hey, Bill.
See ya.
Good to see you. So, lots of news I want to get your perspective on, and lots of ERCOT relevant news. Just to set the stage, in the last few days alone, Google has announced plans to invest $40 billion in Texas.
I was there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the respected analysis firm, Grid Strategies, in a report over just the last day or so, now sees 53 gigawatts of load growth coming in Texas. And this is not in the distant future. This is by 2030. So, data centers
it's actually more than that, but
is that an underestimate?
Keep going.
Wow. So, data centers are among many drivers, as we've been discussing in other conversations. How can ERCOT handle this without sacrificing reliability? And what can ERCOT teach other regions of the country for which, what you're seeing is eventually going to arrive as well?
Okay, thank you. Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for Axios for inviting me. Let me open up with a couple of editorial comments if I can first. AI, I'm going to speak parochially as an American and as a Texan. AI is a race that we have to win. We have to be this needs to be our moonshot for this generation. And the other thing I'd say is that you heard Olivier talk about there is no AI without compute, without energy. I would say it another way, and that is energy and compute are inseparable drivers of value when it comes to AI and the next generation. And so to answer your question, how is ERCOT going to handle this? Basically, it's going to take everybody working together, a collaborative approach. The interconnect queue in Texas last year about this time was about 56 gigawatts of large loads. Today, it's over 200. So think about that. It's had that much growth. Between now and 2030, Texas expects to add 62% to its grid. That's like adding California to Texas. So think about that. So the way to deal with that is the data centers that want to come to Texas, and it seems like about half the infrastructure development in the AI sector is going to Texas, is to come in and be flexible. And my admonitions to people that want to come to Texas are come in with the concept of being a good grid citizen. Okay, and that means come up with ways to do the peak shaving like Rob talked about earlier. So if you can peak shave over those 12 to 18 times a year, that is a net contributor to the reliability of the grid. Those are the things to think about in terms of doing that. And in the interim, given the interconnect queue, you're going to have to bring your own power. Be a net add. Like when I was at Google's announcement last Friday with the governor and with Google CEO, he said, we expect to add more power than we're going to consume. And so I think that's sort of those are the admonitions, or the way that people in this space needs to think about moving forward for the reliability of the grid, and also to control prices or cost to the consumer, as you heard Rob talk about a few minutes ago.
Are you sensing an increased willingness among the large data center operators and the hyperscalers to be willing to accept some of that power shaving and some of that flexibility? Because this has been a little bit controversial. I mean, everybody supports it in theory, but it's a real devil in the details kind of thing.
Well, let me say this. 2 years ago, if we were having this conversation, the things that people looked about for location were, find me a good substation with good transmission access, give me a fiber pipe, give me access to water, some sort of cooling media, labor, and cooperation with local government. Today, it's all those things plus speed to power. And given the interconnect queues that you have all over the country, this isn't just unique to Texas, people are looking at that differently. So the hyperscalers that want to be successful are looking at those. Because really when you think about it, if you're going to invest $40 billion in a data center, about 20% of that is power, 80% is chips and infrastructure. So the 20%, you don't want to let the 20% wag the tail that wags the dog. You want to bring your own power so that you can make that work. You're going to have the backup power anyway. You're going to make an investment in backup power. Might as well add whatever it takes for the reliability that you need to make it your temporary power until you can connect to the grid and make sure you've got a diversity of resources for 5 nines reliability.
I want to ask about something else that's kind of ripped from the headlines. There's a kind of a potentially really big federal policy change brewing. Energy Secretary Chris Wright has asked the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission to assume jurisdiction over the interconnection of large data centers and other large loads. A, is this a good idea? And B, will it happen?
Well, it's not going to happen in Texas because we're outside of FERC,
right, yeah.
fortunately.
But elsewhere.
But yes, I mean, speaking from a macro perspective, there needs to be a change. Yeah, there's going to have to, I mean, even in Texas, if you think about the growth of the interconnect queue, we've got to look at new ways of managing that. The same thing needs to happen nationwide. So there's got to be a new paradigm in the way you look at the interconnect queue and the way that you add load to the grid.
Do you sense, I mean, you're very familiar with Washington. I mean, already we're seeing state power regulators kind of pushing back against this. We're seeing some utilities being, very hesitant about this.
Yeah.
From a sort of political standpoint, I suppose, is this something that you see political will to accomplish over that resistance?
Let me say this. I think that you had pushback when the interstate highway system was built from local governments, from states, and so forth. If we really want to build the AI future that we think we need, I think everybody needs to get on board, and that would include state and local politicians as well as federal politicians all working together. Or policymakers. I don't like to call them politicians, but policymakers need to work together.
Definitely. I mean, part of this actually that's contemplated in Chris Wright's rulemaking proposal. Yeah. I mean, it was written in very kind of broad strokes.
Chris is a smart guy, and I think he's leaning in on this, and I hope that he will be successful in convincing all of the stakeholders that we all need to pull together to make this work.
And one of the things envisioned in that is kind of co-location of data centers and power sources.
Right.
How should grid regulators deal with this? I mean, just yet another thing ripped from the headlines. Just last week, Chevron said that it identified the location for its first behind-the-meter gas plant that it's going to be building for data center campuses, and that is going to be in West Texas. Behind-the-meter gas plants or other big sources, good idea? And
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I totally agree. And look, I mean, people say Chevron hadn't done this before. Chevron and several large energy producers have behind-the-meter power plants in order to power their refinery operations, their chemical operations, and so forth. So this is nothing new. It's just a matter of the scale at which they have to do it. So I applaud those types of decisions. Look, there's a lot of gas in the Permian that's sort of locked because of pipeline capacity that can't get to the Gulf Coast, and so a higher and better value for that gas, rather than being trapped in the Permian, is to use it to produce electrons, to produce AI.
Certainly at the same time, we have a number, we're seeing a lot of final investment decisions this year for LNG export facilities in the Gulf Coast. Is there enough gas to go around in the region?
Absolutely, yeah.
Switching from gas to nuclear, there's a lot of interest right now and a lot of, but very, I suppose, MOU-y, if that's a word,
yeah.
Non-binding memorandum of understandings, aspirational deals for these small modular reactors. So I kind of have the same question for you that I had for Rob. Are these ultimately, given the expansive growth of compute needs and power needs, are small modular reactors going to be a nice to have in this space, or ultimately are they going to be a need to have?
I totally agree with Rob. I think they're going to be a need to have. I mean, look, not everybody's going to need AP1000 in their backyard. I mean, I'd like to have a little 50 kW modular one in my backyard. I'd bury that sucker and leave it for 50 years. But we do need small modular reactors, and I agree with what Rob said, and that is that the hyperscalers, the investors that are putting capital behind AI are accelerating bringing that to being where that they're energized. And I think that's good for the country. It's good for the environment. I think I'm very positive about it. Now, we also need to speed up on the traditional giga scale nuclear, the AP1000s and so forth. We need to accelerate the development of those in this country.
Do you think we're ultimately, there was that, when the president was in Japan, there was that announcement made of an $80 billion agreement with Westinghouse and Kumiko and Brookfield, the co-owners of Westinghouse, that envisions a federal stake in some of these nuclear projects. Do you see, the quote-unquote nuclear renaissance, when I first started covering energy, was supposedly in full swing. We have not yet quite seen the renaissance. Yeah. Do you see more gigawatt-scale reactors coming online as well? I mean, it's hard to know whether Vogtle was a cautionary tale or a great learning exercise that can be replicated.
Well, you had Vogtle, and I've been to Vogtle 3 and 4. On one hand, that was a cautionary tale, but then you also have what happened in the UAE, where they built each one of them sequentially, and the cost went down, the learning curve went up, and the time to completion went down as they went. And look, as a capitalist, I'm not a big believer in industrial policy, except where it really makes a difference. And if you think about why we don't have, more AP1000s today, is because the NRC screwed up the process of licensing years ago. And if we just stayed firm and continued driving forward, we'd do it. So in this case, when it comes to nuclear, I think we need to have a national policy, industrial policy. We're going to have nuclear, we're going to have this date, we're going to adopt these sort of standards and move forward.
Do you think that need for industrial policy, certainly you've made the case for why it's necessary with large gigawatt scale, AP1000 or other design. Is that also needed for the SMRs, or is that more of a private sector thing?
This is my editorial comment, so you can't attribute this to anybody with whom I'm affiliated. Yes, I think so. I believe that the NRC, Department of Energy, ought to say, okay, these are our 5 designs that we're going to move forward with, and put the pedal to the metal in terms of making sure the capital gets deployed, the licensing gets approved, and start the process of observing how they behave in real world time.
So Texas obviously is also home to the, now the largest amount of wind power, solar.
And solar and batteries.
And solar, yeah, solar's going gangbusters, batteries are going gangbusters. What is the nexus between the kind of combination of those intermittent sources and the growth of batteries? Do you see that playing a significant role in the kind of corresponding growth of data centers in the state?
Yes, I do. I think that wind and solar without batteries really are a challenge for a grid. And so, but when you add batteries that can add that basically take intermittent renewable power and make it dispatchable, it really is a net positive to the grid. Look, we have an eclipse every night in Texas. and in the old days, the folks in the control room, once they got past that August peak at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, they could sort of breathe easy. Now, when you have your eclipse at night and you've got 24 gigawatts of solar dropping offline and you have to make it up, it's nice to have 20 gigawatts of batteries out there to get you to that hour ending 2200.
Definitely. Our time is winding down, so I wanted to kind of, yeah, that goes fast, but I wanted to do a lightning round with you as well. And actually, honestly, I have the same question because there's a lot of kind of storylines taking hold in this space. As someone with such a front row seat on the regulatory side, but also someone who has been in the business world as well, can you tell me about any sort of myths about data centers and AI and infrastructure that should be busted?
Well, let me say this. I don't think Senator Bernie has it right when he says they're raising cost. If you look at what Rob said, a data center can be a great stabilizer to the grid. We had a huge influx of crypto, let's say going back 10 years in Texas, and people were anti-crypto because they thought they were not good grid citizens. I was thinking about them as a giant shock absorber. When energy prices went high, they dropped offline, which corresponds with your peak loads, and so they can be a net buffer. Same thing with data centers. They're capable of doing it, and they need to be more upfront with that when they're applying for their interconnections.
Is that a sort of disclosure problem on their part or messaging problem?
I think it's been a mindset change. That they said, in the old days, like I said 2 years ago, they could come and connect the grid and turn on and not worry about things. And today they need to be much more adaptable and conscious of the way the public could perceive them negatively.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.